Over the past 30 years in medicine, I've had the honor and the heartache of walking alongside families as they navigate some of the most difficult chapters of life, especially when a loved one is slowly being taken by dementia. I remember one of my patients, Mary, a former literature teacher, sharp as a tack, full of grace. In her final years, she no longer recognized her daughter. The poems she once recited from memory were lost to her. And though I've seen this story unfold many times, it never stops being deeply personal. One question I continue to hear, even from families who have been caregiving for years, is, "Doctor, how does someone actually die from dementia?" In today's video, I want to answer that question with honesty, clarity, and compassion. We'll walk through how the disease truly progresses, what typically causes death, and just as importantly, how you, as a caregiver or loved one, can be present and helpful during those final stages. Dementia rarely follows a neat, linear trajectory. In my experience, it unfolds in a pattern that's more like a slow descent down a staircase, each step marking a quiet but irreversible change. It's not a steady decline, day by day, but rather a series of plateaus and sudden drops. The person stabilizes for a time, days, weeks, sometimes months, where you begin to think, maybe this is our new normal. You adjust, they adjust. And then, out of nowhere, something shifts. A fall, a fever, a urinary tract infection that seems small at first. Or perhaps a bit of food goes the wrong way and causes aspiration pneumonia. And just like that, everything changes. I remember a patient named Harold, an engineer in his earlier life, meticulous, thoughtful, quiet. For months, he had been in what we'd call a moderate stage of dementia. He still recognized his wife. He didn't speak much, but he would smile when she read to him from his old journals. Then one evening, he aspirated on a small bite of soup. It didn't seem serious at first, but by the next morning he had developed a fever, and within days his condition took a sharp downward turn. He never returned to that previous version of himself. He survived the infection, but he emerged from it weaker, more withdrawn, less connected to the world around him. That became his new baseline. And it never came back up. This is the reality for many families. They watch as their loved one steps down to each lower level of functioning, first needing reminders to eat, then needing help eating, then not wanting to eat at all. What's so difficult is that between these episodes of decline, there can be periods of stillness, times when nothing seems to be changing and hope flickers quietly in the background. But each plateau is a little lower than the last, and the overall path continues downward. What makes this disease particularly cruel is not only the loss of memory or function, but the slow erosion of identity. And yet, there's something profoundly human in the way families adapt. They learn new ways to connect, to communicate without words, to find meaning in a shared glance or a gentle touch. And as the illness progresses, what often surprises people most is how the end looks, how different it is from what they imagined at the beginning. We'll talk about that next. What actually causes death in dementia and what it looks like in the final stages. Because knowing what to expect can soften the fear. And when you're no longer caught off guard by every change, you can spend more time simply being present. With comfort, with intention, and with love. One of the greatest misconceptions about dementia is that its ending will be as chaotic and disoriented as its middle. In the earlier stages, we often see confusion, agitation, even fear. Patients may pace or wander, lash out verbally, or seem trapped in an internal world they cannot explain. It is emotionally exhausting for families, this sense of watching someone drift in and out of themselves, often unrecognizable from who they once were. But something changes in the final stage. As the body begins to shut down, the mind, paradoxically, often seems to soften. I've sat beside countless patients during this time, and I can tell you, the last days of dementia are usually profoundly peaceful. The restlessness quiets, the hallucinations fade, the confusion that once caused anxiety and frustration seems to dissolve. What remains is stillness. Most patients spend their final days sleeping, deeply, continuously. They stop eating, not out of defiance, but because the drive simply disappears. The body no longer signals hunger or thirst. Muscles relax, speech fades, and while that can be painful for families to witness, there is often a serenity that fills the room. It's as if the long struggle is slowly coming to an end, not with a sudden stop, but with a gentle exhale. I remember holding the hand of a woman named Evelyn, whose daughter had been by her side every day for nearly a decade of decline. In those final days, Evelyn barely opened her eyes, but her breathing was soft, her face was calm. Her daughter sat beside her, reading from old family letters and humming church hymns. There were no medical interventions, no alarms, no rush, just presence, just peace. And when Evelyn passed, it was as if she had simply slipped into a deeper kind of sleep. This phase, while difficult emotionally, offers something sacred, an opportunity for loved ones to shift from doing to simply being. There's no need for plans or decisions, no more treatments to weigh. What matters now is comfort, touch, voice, gentle presence. As we move into the final part of this conversation, I want to talk about how you, as a caregiver or loved one, can support someone during this sacred time. What comfort really looks like, how to know you're doing enough, and how, even in the midst of anticipatory grief, you can find moments of connection and meaning. Because this chapter, though heavy, holds its own kind of grace. If you are caring for someone with dementia, especially in the final stages, you are holding one of the most sacred roles a person can take on. It is quiet, often invisible work. There are no awards, no headlines, just small, constant acts of love, repositioning a tired body, offering sips of water even when they're refused, watching for signs the skin is growing too fragile. But let me tell you this as someone who has worked beside caregivers for decades. What you're doing matters more than you know. At this point in the illness, there's no longer a cure to chase. No more medications that can reverse what's happening. What matters now is comfort, ensuring the person is clean, safe, and free from unnecessary suffering. I always tell families, if you're unsure what to do, ask yourself 3 questions. Are they clean? Are they safe? Are they comfortable? If you can answer yes to those, you are doing enough. Fall prevention becomes one of the most important concerns, even when the person is spending most of their time in bed. A single fall can change everything, can trigger the decline we spoke of earlier, or cause pain that's difficult to manage. Even a small movement, an attempt to sit up or shift in bed, can be risky. Keeping the environment soft, predictable, and attended can make all the difference. Infection prevention is another quiet battle caregivers face. It might be as simple as helping with hygiene after using the bathroom or changing linens regularly. But these little efforts help ward off infections that a weakened body may not be able to recover from. And then there is the matter of the skin, often overlooked until it becomes a problem. When a person becomes bedbound, their body is constantly resting on pressure points. The tailbone, the heels, the shoulder blades, areas where the bone is close to the surface, can begin to break down. What starts as a small red spot can become an open wound if not addressed early. I've seen caregivers blame themselves for this, for not catching it in time. But please hear me. Even with the best care, pressure wounds can still happen. This is not a reflection of neglect. It is the nature of a body that no longer moves the way it once did. What matters is catching them early. Check for signs of redness when you change or reposition your loved one. Use pillows to relieve pressure. Float the heels with soft support so they're not pressing against the bed. I once worked with a man named Robert who cared for his wife Linda at home until the very end. He wasn't a nurse, had no medical background, but he learned everything he could. He kept her skin intact. He kept her bed by the window so the light could reach her face. And when I visited one afternoon, he was gently brushing her hair, even though she hadn't opened her eyes in days. She always liked it this way, he told me. This is the kind of care that transcends medicine. It's not about doing everything, it's about doing what matters. And if you're not the primary caregiver but want to help, there's still so much you can do. We'll talk about that next. Because supporting a caregiver is also part of this sacred circle of care, and no one should walk this road alone. If you are a friend, a neighbor, a cousin, or a sibling standing slightly outside the immediate circle of care, know this: your presence matters more than you might realize. In my years of visiting homes and hospice bedsides, I've seen how the simplest gesture, a delivered meal, a few hours of respite, a warm cup of coffee, can become a lifeline to someone who has been quietly carrying the weight of care for far too long. The role of the primary caregiver is a lonely one, even when done with love. There are no shifts, no days off. Time becomes a loop of tending, anticipating, responding. And in that loop, caregivers often forget themselves. They eat standing up, they sleep lightly, they ignore their own fatigue. They begin to feel like asking for help is a failure, or worse, a burden on others. But caregiving is not meant to be a solitary journey. It never was. I remember visiting a family where the husband had been caring for his wife, who had advanced dementia, for nearly 4 years. He was a quiet, gentle man, proud and private. He hadn't left the house in weeks. A neighbor who cared deeply but didn't know what to say would simply drop off a sandwich at the front door every Thursday, along with a handwritten note. "Thinking of you, let me know if you need a break." It took months before the husband accepted the offer, but when he finally did, just 2 hours at the park with an old friend, he came back and wept. "I didn't realize how tired I was," he told me, "or how much I needed to feel like a person again." If you want to help someone who is caregiving, ask specifically, "Can I sit with your mom for 2 hours this weekend while you go for a walk? I made a pot of stew. Can I bring you a bowl and stay for 10 minutes? Don't wait for them to tell you what they need. Just offer, gently. And if you are the caregiver, hear this: accepting help is not a sign of weakness. It is a strategy for endurance. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Allow others in. Let them witness the quiet courage of your care. Let them hold the edges of your grief so you can breathe, even just for a moment. There is a kind of sacred reciprocity that happens in the final stages of life. The person who is dying is not the only one who is transforming. You are too. And allowing others to step in, to witness, to support, to honor this process makes the journey more bearable, more human. In the final thoughts I want to share with you, we'll talk about letting go, how to recognize when the end is truly near, and how to trust yourself in those moments. Because as difficult as these days are, they can also be marked by grace and by the deep, quiet knowing that love was present all along. Over the years, I've been invited into some of the most intimate moments a family can experience, not just as a physician, but as a witness, to courage, to exhaustion, to love in its rawest and most unspoken form. The stories I carry with me are not clinical cases. They are people. They are voices, hands held, rooms filled with the hum of oxygen machines and the silence of waiting. And they are what taught me what caregiving really means. I remember Mrs. Alvarez. Her husband had been caring for her at home for nearly 7 years after her Alzheimer's diagnosis. By the time I first met them, she no longer spoke, no longer followed conversations, and barely responded to touch. He had set up a small bedroom in the living room so she could still hear the sounds of life, the kitchen, the front door, the laughter of grandchildren. "I want her to know she's still home," he told me. Every morning he dressed her in her favorite sweaters, braided her hair, and opened the blinds just so the morning sun would warm her face. He was tired, his back ached, but his care was an act of devotion, not duty. When I gently suggested bringing in a hospice aide to help, he hesitated. "I don't want strangers touching her," he said. We talked for a long time. Eventually, he allowed a nurse to come for a short morning visit. A week later, he admitted it had given him the first full night's sleep in months. I had forgotten what it felt like to lie down and not be afraid. Then there was Clarissa, a middle-aged daughter caring for her mother who had frontotemporal dementia, a less common but especially disorienting form of the illness. Her mother had once been a painter, known for bold, abstract canvases full of color and chaos. In the last year of her life, she stopped painting altogether, but Clarissa filled her room with her old work, hung them on every wall, printed them on pillowcases and coffee mugs, even kept one tucked in her purse. "So she's surrounded by herself," she explained. When her mother entered the final days, Clarissa sat by her side and played Chopin on a small keyboard. Her hands trembled, but the music was steady. "She painted to music," she said softly, "so I'll give her one more canvas." I've seen neighbors rotate night shifts to help a man who refused to place his wife in a facility. I've watched a grown son shave his father's face with reverence, holding the razor like an altar object. I once witnessed two estranged siblings reunite by their mother's bedside, tears breaking decades of silence. These are not just stories, they are reminders that the end of life is still life. And care, in its purest form, is not about fixing, it's about staying, showing up, bearing witness. So if you are caring for someone now or supporting someone who is, remember, the small things are not small. The quiet moments are not empty. And even when you feel invisible in your labor, what you are doing is profoundly seen by the person you love, by those around you, and by those of us who've had the privilege to walk beside you. In the final reflections, I'll offer some thoughts on how to recognize when the end is near, and how to trust that, even in the face of uncertainty, your love has always been enough. As we come to the close of this conversation, I want to speak to you, not as a doctor, but as someone who has walked beside many families through many long nights and into many final mornings. If you're watching this video, you may be in the midst of something hard, something sacred. You may be caring for someone you love, or perhaps you're preparing to say goodbye. Wherever you are in the journey, I want you to know you are not alone. Dementia is a cruel and complicated disease. It takes so much from the person living with it and from those who love them. It blurs the lines of identity, of time, of memory. And yet, even in the midst of that, I have seen something extraordinary. The way love adapts. The way families create new languages. Through touch, through tone, through simple presence. I have seen people rise to the occasion in ways they never imagined. I have seen sons become caretakers, daughters become advocates, spouses become steady anchors in a sea of change. And I have also seen people carry guilt, deep, unnecessary guilt, for not doing enough, for feeling tired, for wanting a moment of quiet. I want you to release that. This work, this care you are giving is already more than enough. You are walking a road that asks everything of you, and you are still here. That is love. That is more than enough. When the end nears, and you will know when it does, even if no one tells you, what matters most is not the medical decisions, it's not the perfect words, it's not whether you fed them one more spoonful or repositioned them just right. What matters most is that they are not alone, that someone is there, that someone is holding a hand, whispering a name, breathing with them in the stillness. There is something sacred about being with someone as they leave this world, something quiet and holy, and if you are there for that moment, if you are the one holding space for their final breath, know that you are part of something timeless. You are closing a circle that began long before memory and long after words. So take care of yourself, let others help, rest when you can, cry when you need, and know that in doing this work, in walking someone home, you have done something beautiful. Thank you for letting me walk this part of the journey with you.